Hey everyone, are you ready to dive into a book that's basically a celebrity in the world of psychology?
It is a pretty big deal.
We're talking about Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and let me tell you, this book is packed with aha moments that might just change how you make decisions. Like, seriously, this book is about to rock your world. So, the main takeaway, get ready for this. We've got two modes of thinking running the show up in our brains. It's like two different characters in a movie, right? We've got System 1, the impulsive one, always on, making those split-second judgments, like steering you away from danger before you even realize what's happening.
Yeah, it's amazing how much influence this fast thinking has on us, constantly running in the background, shaping how we see the world, and even guiding our choices without us even knowing it's happening.
Right. Wild, right? But thankfully, we're not completely ruled by our impulses. That's where System 2 comes in, our more thoughtful, analytical self, the one who takes a minute. Think of it this way. System 2 is the friend who carefully considers every angle before making a move, the one you want on your team when you're solving a tricky problem. But, and there's a but, isn't there? System 2 can be a bit lazy. It's like imagine playing Scrabble, right? Trying to think of words starting with K. Piece of cake.
Yeah, we can do that.
Now try thinking of words with K as the third letter. Whoa, suddenly it's way harder, right?
Oh, for sure.
Why is that?
Well, that's because System 1 loves what's easy and familiar. Just like spotting that K right at the beginning, our brains love to jump to conclusions based on whatever information is easiest to access, what's right there. And that, my friend, is how we get tripped up by cognitive biases, those mental shortcuts that feel totally right, but often lead us down the wrong path.
Okay, I've totally been there. You ever blurt something out and then think, wait, where did that come from? Yep, that was System 1 calling the shots. Or how about this? Ever catch yourself about to say something totally inappropriate, but then just in the nick of time, your inner voice is like, nope, don't do it.
Yeah.
That's System 2 finally getting off the couch. But man, sometimes it's a close call.
It's a perfect illustration of one of Kahneman's main points. We tend to overestimate how rational we really are. We like to believe we carefully think through every decision, but in reality, that impulsive System 1 is often the one secretly writing the script for our choices. There's this awesome example in the book, the bat and ball problem. It's trickier than it sounds, and even students at those super competitive universities get it wrong because they don't slow down and engage that slower, more logical System 2.
It's like our brains are wired to prioritize efficiency above all else. And speaking of efficiency, Kahneman talks about mental effort being a limited resource. Like a muscle that gets tired. He even compares it to physical exertion. Like most of the time, our mental life is like a casual stroll. Sometimes it's a jog, but rarely do we ever go full-on sprint. And believe me, trying to add 3 to a string of numbers in your head, that's a mental marathon right there. They've even done research where they measured people's pupils. How they dilate when we're concentrating. And guess what? Turns out, even just having a casual conversation takes surprisingly little mental effort.
Which is a huge deal when you think about it. That's exactly why those mental shortcuts, the heuristics, are so powerful. They're our brain's way of conserving energy. But of course, there's a trade-off. They also make us more vulnerable to those judgment errors and sometimes even, manipulation.
Totally. It's like our brains have this unspoken rule.
Yeah.
If it's easy, it must be true. Which, okay, makes sense to a point. But it can definitely lead us down some interesting paths, right?
Yeah, no kidding. It's like our brains would rather go with a good story over cold, hard facts every time.
Speaking of stories, Kahneman talks about how easily we jump to conclusions, even with just a little bit of information. He gives this example, like, imagine someone says, will Mindic be a good leader? She's intelligent and strong. And what happens in our heads? We automatically fill in the blanks, right? Assuming those are good things for a leader. But, and this is where it gets interesting, what if that sentence kept going? What if they said, corrupt and cruel? Kind of changes the whole picture, doesn't it?
Exactly. Our brains, specifically that impulsive System 1, are hardwired to crave a good story. And that means they often prioritize things feeling nice and consistent over actual accuracy, especially when we're dealing with limited information. And this has some pretty big implications for, pretty much everything, how we judge people, how we interpret the news. We're always filling in the gaps with our own assumptions and biases.
It's like we're all playing detective, but with super unreliable narrators stuck in our heads.
And it gets even wilder. Kahneman talks about this thing called priming. It's this idea that these subtle cues in our surroundings can actually influence what we think and do. and we don't even realize it's happening.
Oh, tell me about that elderly words experiment. That one really messed with my head. So they had these students and they asked them to unscramble some sentences. Some of the words were things like, Florida, wrinkle, forgetful, those kinds of words we associate with older folks.
What happened next?
Okay, get this. Those students, just from being exposed to those words, they actually walk slower down the hallway afterwards. Like their brains literally got put in slow motion.
It's wild. The really mind-blowing thing about priming is that it makes you question the whole idea of free will, like how much of what we think and do is really our own choice, and how much is just these invisible forces messing with us.
Right. That's a bit unsettling. Okay, you ready for another brain twister? Kahneman goes into this thing called the Linda problem. Picture this. There's a woman, Linda, 31, single, outspoken, really bright, majored in philosophy. She's passionate about social justice, participated in those big anti-nuclear demonstrations back in the day. You get the idea. Okay, here's the question. Which is more likely? A, Linda's a bank teller, or B, Linda's a bank teller, A and D, active in the feminist movement.
I'm going to guess most people would go with option B. It just feels like a better fit with Linda, based on what we know.
Exactly. But here's the thing, and it's a big thing statistically. It's way less likely for her to be both a bank teller and a feminist compared to just being a bank teller.
It's such a classic example of how our brains love a good story, even if it clashes with basic probability. We get so caught up in what feels right in the narrative that we completely ignore the actual odds, the base rates.
It's like our brains are basically saying, nah, numbers are boring. Who cares about those? Linda's a feminist bank teller. End of story.
And that, my friend, is base rate neglect in action. And let me tell you, it can lead to some seriously bad decisions, whether it's about judging someone's qualifications for a job or, like, making big financial investments.
It's like that saying, don't believe everything you think, except it's our brains that are trying to pull a fast one on us. And speaking of tricking ourselves, brace yourself for the illusion of understanding. It's this thing where we look back at things that happen and we're all like, oh yeah, I totally saw that coming, as if it was always meant to be. Like, think about the whole Google success story. It's easy to look back and be like, oh yeah, those founders, they're geniuses. It was inevitable. But Kahneman points out how much luck played a part too.
Hindsight bias is a powerful, powerful force. It makes us build these narratives where everything's predetermined. But the truth is way more complicated, way messier.
Right. Like we're writing our own history books, conveniently forgetting all those times we were wrong, or maybe just got lucky. Makes you wonder, right? How much of success is really skill and how much is just being in the right place, right time? Kind of humbling.
It really is. And it gets even more interesting when you think about like how this applies to experts in different fields.
Right. Like you'd think experts with all their knowledge, all that experience, they'd be better at predicting stuff, but...
Well, here's the thing. Kahneman found that a lot of times, simple algorithms, just basic formulas, can actually outperform expert judgment. Now, this isn't to say experts are useless. Obviously, they bring the ton to the table, but...
But we shouldn't just blindly trust their predictions.
Exactly. It's about being aware of those limitations, especially when things get really complex, really unpredictable.
Right. So what's the takeaway for the rest of us, the non-experts, just trying to make sense of things?
I think the biggest thing is just like a call for humility. We're all susceptible to these biases. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how informed you think you are.
We're all running around with these like slightly glitchy operating systems in our heads.
That's a great way to put it. The first step is awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Question your assumptions, try to see things from different angles.
And maybe cut ourselves some slack when we inevitably make those not so rational decisions.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing those biases and then, using that knowledge to make better, more informed choices.
What really struck me about thinking fast and slow was seeing these biases play out in my own life, Like Kahneman talks about how our remembering self kind of takes over sometimes, how we prioritize experiences we know we'll remember later, even if it means like sacrificing a bit of enjoyment in the moment.
It's so true, isn't it? Think about like being on vacation. Ever find yourself choosing activities, will make good stories or awesome pictures, even if it means being a little stressed or uncomfortable in the moment?
Oh, all the time. Like, who wants a chill beach day when you can climb a mountain for that epic selfie, right?
Exactly. It makes you think, are we really trying to be happy in the moment?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we just trying to create those memories we can share later? Kahneman seems to think it's often the latter.
It's like we're constantly curating our own highlight reels, even if those highlights don't really reflect how we felt at the time.
Such a thought-provoking idea, right? It makes you wonder, how much are we actually shaping our experiences to fit some kind of narrative instead of just like being present?
So much to think about. Well, everyone listening, we've barely scratched the surface of thinking fast and slow today. Hopefully, though, this deep dive has given you a new way of looking at your own thoughts, decisions, even your memories. And remember, we're all in the same boat here. We're all trying to navigate this crazy world with these flawed but fascinating brains. The key is being aware of those flaws and, using that awareness to make better choices. And hey, maybe even laugh at ourselves a little along the way. Until next time, everyone, happy thinking.